It was a Tuesday. It's always a Tuesday, isn't it? The world never ends on a weekend. We were topping out the spire, the newest, ugliest glass needle they were piercing into the heart of the loop. 60 stories of structural steel, open to the wind. It was cold. That biting, wet wind coming off Lake Michigan that cuts right through your Carhartt jacket. I was walking the I-beam highway, a 12-inch wide girder, 600 feet above the street. No safety rail. Just me, my spud wrench, and a tie-off cable I hadn't clipped in yet because I was moving fast. "Yo, Marcus!" I turned. It was Miller, the kid. 19 years old, green as summer grass. He was clutching a column like it was his mother, his knuckles white. "Wind's picking up, boss," Miller yelled over the gale. "Crane operator says the load is swinging too much." I looked up. The tower crane, a massive red T-shape looming another 100 feet above us, was struggling. Sarah was in the cab. She was the best operator in the city. She didn't complain about wind unless it was dangerous. I tapped my radio. "Sarah, talk to me. What's the sway?" "It's weird, Marcus," Sarah's voice crackled in my earpiece. "It's not the wind. The sensors are reading vibration, vertical vibration. Is there a pile driver working downstairs?" "No," I said, looking down through the open steel grate of the floor. 600 feet down, the street was a grid of toy cars and ants in trench coats. "Foundation work finished 6 months ago. We're quiet down there." "Well, something is shaking the stick," she said. "I'm getting a harmonics warning. I'm locking the jib." I looked at my boots. Red Wing Iron Rangers, scuffed to hell. I felt it then. It wasn't a shake. An earthquake is a shake, a violent side-to-side rattle. This was a shimmer. It felt like standing on a giant subwoofer that had just turned on a low, subsonic bass note. A hum that vibrated up through the steel columns, through the soles of my boots, and into my teeth. "Miller?" I said, clipping my safety lanyard onto the static line. "Clip in, now." "Is it a quake?" Miller asked, fumbling with his carabiner. He dropped his wrench. We watched it fall. It spun end over end, shrinking into a speck until it disappeared into the traffic below. It never made a sound, because the sound of the city had changed. Usually, Chicago was a roar, sirens, horns, the rumble of the L train, but the roar was changing pitch. It was turning into a scream. And then, a wet, tearing sound, like ripping a phone book in half, amplified by 1,000,000. "Look at the street," I whispered. I knelt on the beam and looked over the edge. The intersection of Wacker and Adams, it's usually a gridlock of taxis and buses, but the road was rippling. The gray asphalt wasn't flat anymore. It was rolling like the surface of a waterbed. I saw a city bus, number 124, waiting at the light. Suddenly, the front tires dipped, not into a pothole. The whole front of the bus just nosed down. It sank, smoothly, quietly. The asphalt parted like thick pudding. The bus tipped forward to a 45-degree angle, the rear wheels lifting off the ground, spinning in the air. And then, it was gone, swallowed. The street closed over the back bunker with a wet glorp sound that I heard even from 60 stories up. "Boss?" Miller sounded like he was going to vomit. "Where did the bus go?" "The ground," I said, standing up, my hand gripping the cold steel of the column. "The ground is loose." It wasn't just the bus. I looked north toward the river. The Chicago River is usually a dark green ribbon constrained by concrete retaining walls. The walls were dissolving. The concrete embankments were slumping into the water, turning into gray sludge. And without the walls, the river was spilling out. But it wasn't flooding. It was mixing. The water mixed with the soil, creating a massive, expanding slurry. Then the noise hit us. Boom! Crack! A 3-story brownstone building on the corner, brick and mortar, built in the 1920s. It didn't fall over. It settled. It was like watching a hydraulic press crush a soda can, but in slow motion. The foundation gave way and the building just dropped vertically. The first floor disappeared into the earth. Then the second. The windows blew out from the pressure, spraying glass onto the sidewalk, which was also sinking. Dust plumes shot up, thick brown clouds of pulverized masonry. "Radio check," I yelled into my mic. All crews, get to the deck, get off the ladders, clip into the main structure. Panic on the radio, screaming. The hoist is jammed, someone yelled. The ground elevator station just sank, Marcus. The operator is gone. Forget the hoist. Climb the columns, get to the 60th. I looked at Miller. The kid was frozen. He was staring at the horizon. Miller! I grabbed his harness and shook him. Look at me. Don't look down. The grid. The power grid. I looked. Across the city, the transformers were exploding. Blue-white flashes popped like flashbulbs. The utility poles were sinking. The tension on the power lines were snapping them like guitar strings. Wires whipped through the air, sparking, igniting the gas mains that were rupturing as the earth shifted. Fire. But even the fire couldn't stay above ground. I saw a gas main ignite, a massive geyser of flame, and then the hole it was spewing from widened, and the fire itself seemed to be sucked into the mud. The city was eating itself.
Sarah, I called the crane. Sarah, report!
I'm here, Marcus. Her voice was surprisingly calm. Too calm. The shock. I can see everything. The parks, the highway. It's all liquid. It looks like soup, Marcus. Why does the ground look like soup? Liquefaction, I said. The word popped into my head from a geology class I took 20 years ago. The vibration, it separated the soil particles. Friction is gone. How deep? She asked. I don't know. Deep enough to swallow a bus. The building we were standing on, the spire, shuddered. Miller screamed and hugged the beam. The vibration was violent now. The steel frame groaned, a high-pitched shriek of metal under torture. We were rooted deep. Our caissons went down 100 feet to bedrock. We should be stable, but the friction piles, the dirt holding the sides of the foundation, that was gone. We were a 60-story tuning fork standing in a bucket of mud. We're gonna tip, Miller yelled. No, I shouted. We're on bedrock. We hold. We ride it out. I looked over the edge again. The chaos below was absolute. People. I try not to think about the people. From up here, they were just dots. Swarms of dots running from the sinking buildings, running into the streets. But the streets were the worst place to be. I saw a crowd rushing an intersection. The pavement looked solid, but as soon as the weight of the crowd hit it, the surface tension broke. They sank, waist deep, then chest deep. It was quicksand, industrial, city-wide quicksand. The more they struggled, the faster they went down. The sound of the sirens stopped, not because they turned off, but because the police cars and fire trucks were gone, buried. Within 10 minutes, the street level, level 0, was a memory. The brown sludge had risen to the second-floor windows of the surviving buildings. Marcus, Sarah's voice came over the radio again. Look at the west side, the residential district. I turned my head. The west side is mostly 2-story houses, wood frame, shallow basements. They were bobbing. They had broken off their foundations and were floating in the mud like driftwood in a flood. Some were capsized. Some were grinding against each other, splintering. But the high-rises, the downtown canyons, we were the tombstones. The skyscrapers were still standing, mostly. The older ones, the stone ones, they were sinking fast. I watched the Tribune Tower, a Gothic masterpiece, lose its first 5 floors in a minute. But the steel towers, the modern ones, we were islands. Sound off, I yelled into the radio. Who is on the deck? This is Kowalski, 58th floor. I got 3 guys with me. This is T-Bone. I'm on the stairs, 55th. The stairs are shaking bad, boss. Keep climbing, I ordered. Get to the open air. If this building twists, the stairwell will collapse and crush you. Get to the steel. I sat down on the beam. The adrenaline was making my hands shake, vibrating in sync with the building. I pulled a cigarette from my pocket. It broke in my fingers. I stared at the tobacco flakes blowing away in the wind. Miller, I said softly, check the bolts on column C4. Make sure the friction connects are tight. What? Miller stared at me with wild eyes. The world is ending and you want me to check bolts? Yes, I said. My voice was hard. Because if the world is ending, this beam is the only piece of it we have left, and I want to make sure it stays attached. Check the damn bolts, Miller. He moved. It gave him something to do. I looked at my watch. 10:14 a.m. 14 minutes since it started. The roaring had stopped. The screaming had stopped. Now it was just the sound of the wind and the wet, slurping sound of millions of tons of mud settling. I crawled to the edge one more time. The dust cloud was settling, revealing the new topography. Chicago was gone. What was left was a swamp, a brown, churning lagoon of debris, broken glass, and twisted metal. And poking out of it, like dead trees in a marsh, were the tops of the buildings. The Willis Tower, the Hancock, the Aeon Center, and us. "Hey," I said into the radio. "Sarah, you okay up there?" "I'm rocking, Marcus, but the counterweights are holding. I think the sinking stopped." Yeah, the vibration stopped. The subsonic hum was gone. The liquefaction event was over. Now the mud would start to harden. Whatever was down there stayed down there. "Boss!" Kowalski came running out of the stairwell onto the decking of the 60th floor. He was covered in white drywall dust. "The lobby? The guys in the trailer office?" "Gone," I said. "Don't ask about them." Kowalski looked over the edge. He gagged, putting his hand over his mouth. "Is it water? Did the lake flood?" "It's earth. It's the ground. It went soft." "How do we get down?" I looked at him, a veteran ironworker, tough as nails, looking for a ladder. "We don't," I said. I stood up and walked to the edge of the decking. I pointed at the horizon. "Look at the ground, Kowalski. It's already setting. See that sheen? That's the water separating from the soil. It's turning into concrete. If we went down there, we couldn't walk on it. We'd sink or we'd get stuck." "So what do we do?" I looked up at the crane. Sarah was up there. She had the best view in the city. And she had the winch. "We build," I said. "Build what?" "Bridges," I said. "We're skywalkers now, boys. For real time."
I did a head count. Me, Miller, Kowalski, T-Bone, 3 other bolters, Davy, Sanchez, and Big Red, and Sarah in the crane. 8 of us. We had our tool belts. We had a few coolers with lunch, sandwiches, water bottles, energy drinks. We had a portable generator for the welders, and we had about 4,000 tons of structural steel beams stacked on the deck, waiting to be erected. "Okay, listen up," I shouted. The wind snatched my words, but they gathered around. "Phones are dead, towers are down or buried, power is gone. We are on an island. This building is 60 stories tall, but right now, effectively, it's only 20 stories above the mud. We have no elevator, we have no stairs to the ground." I pointed to the building across the street, the Prudential 2 Tower. It was close, maybe 80 feet of gap between our skeleton and their roof. Their roof had a water tower. I could see it. "We need water," I said. "That's priority 1. "That's a finished building," Sanchez said. "They have people. They have office workers." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe they're trapped on the lower floors in the dark. But the roof is accessible." "It's 80 feet away, Marcus," T-Bone said. "We can't jump." I looked up at the red boom of the crane. "Sarah," I keyed the mic, "how much diesel you got in the generator up there?" "Tank is half full. Maybe 12 hours of runtime if I idle." "Okay, drop the hook. We're going fishing." The first hour of the new world was spent inventorying. We had 6 bottles of water, 4 ham sandwiches, 2 bags of chips, 1 pack of Oreos, 3 welding tanks, oxygen and acetylene, 2 crates of high-tension bolts, and the clothes on our backs. The sun was high now. It was noon. The wind had died down, replaced by a smell. That was the worst part, the smell. It smelled like a sewer that had been cracked open and baked in the sun. It smelled of methane, wet rot, and rust. I walked to the edge of the 60th floor again. The mud below was changing color. It was drying. A crust was forming on top, cracking like a dry lake bed. I saw something moving down there. A dog. A stray, maybe. It was trying to walk across the crust. It made it 10 feet. Then the crust broke. The dog yelped and slipped under the surface. The mud burped a bubble of gas and then sealed shut. "Nobody goes down," I whispered to myself. "Nobody." "Hook is down, Marcus," Sarah said. The massive steel hook of the crane, the size of a refrigerator, hovered over the deck. "Miller," I said, "grab a choker, strap a beam, a W-14, 30-footer. "What are we doing?" "We're making a gangway," I said. "We're going to the Prudential roof." "Why?" "Because," I pointed to the north where black smoke was starting to rise from the horizon. "The fires are coming, and we are standing on a steel skeleton with no walls to stop the smoke. We need a building with glass. We need a fortress." We rigged the beam. The crane groaned as it lifted the steel. Sarah swung the stick. The beam floated out over the abyss, the 80-foot gap between our safety and the next rooftop. I watched it swing. If the crane failed, if the vibrations had damaged the building bolts, that beam would pull the crane down and us with it. "Easy," I murmured. "Gentle, Sarah." The beam lowered onto the parapet of the Prudential building. It smashed the limestone coping, sending chips falling into the mud below. It settled, one end on our deck, one end on their roof. A steel bridge, 12 inches wide, 80 feet long, 600 feet drop. "Who's first?" Kowalski asked, looking at the narrow strip of metal. I tightened my belt. I checked my spud wrench. "Foreman goes first," I said. I stepped onto the beam. The wind hit me instantly. I wasn't clipped in. There was no line to clip into yet, just balance. I put one foot in front of the other. Don't look at the mud. Don't look at the sunken city. Look at the roof. I took a step. The beam bounced under my weight. I was halfway across when I saw the face. In the window of the Prudential building, top floor, just below the roofline. A man in a suit. He was pressing his face against the glass. He was screaming, banging on the window. And behind him, the room was filling up, not with people, but with the mud. It was seeping out of the elevators. It was being pumped up through the shafts like a geyser. The pressure from below was forcing the sludge up into the buildings. He wasn't trapped by height. He was drowning in earth, 60 stories up. I froze on the beam. "Marcus!" Miller yelled from behind me. "Move!" I tore my eyes away from the dying man. I focused on the ledge. 5 steps. 3. 1. I jumped onto the Prudential roof. Solid gravel. I turned back to the crew. I raised my fist. Safe! But as I looked back at our construction site, I saw the main column, the spine of our building, shift just an inch. The mud was settling, and our skeleton was tilting.
Crossing an 80-foot gap on a 12-inch beam is standard work for us. We do it every day. But usually, we're tied off. Usually, the building on the other side isn't a tomb. I stood on the Prudential roof, my boots crunching on the gravel ballast. I turned back to the crew stranded on our skeletal tower. "Come on," I yelled, cupping my hands. "One at a time. Don't look at the horizon." Miller was next. The kid was shaking. I could see the vibration in his knees from 80 feet away. "I can't!" Miller screamed. The wind tore the words from his mouth, but I read his lips. "You walk or you sink, Miller," I roared back. "Move your feet." He stepped out. He was crawling, not walking. He straddled the beam, shimmying across on his hands and thighs. It was slow, too slow. I looked down at the gap between the buildings. The alleyway below was a churning river of sludge. The pressure from the collapsing streets was forcing the mud upwards between the towers, like toothpaste being squeezed from a tube. It was rising. "Don't look down, Miller," I whispered to myself. He made it to the halfway point. Then the wind gusted. A sudden, violent updraft caused by the thermal difference between the cold mud and the hot glass of the buildings. The beam twisted, just a fraction. Miller slipped. He rotated, his thigh sliding off the steel. He slammed his chest into the flange, grabbing the beam with both arms in a death hug. His legs dangled in the void. "Hold on!" I shouted. I couldn't run out there. If I added my weight and momentum to the beam while he was unstable, I'd bounce him right off. "Help me!" Miller shrieked. "Pull up!" I coached him. "Hook your heel! Use your heel, Miller!" I watched him struggle. His boots scraped uselessly against the smooth steel web of the I-beam. He was heavy, wearing a tool belt, winter gear, heavy boots. Gravity was calling him home. Then I saw T-Bone move. On the other side, T-Bone didn't hesitate. He didn't walk, he ran. He sprinted along the beam, light as a cat, balancing with his arms out. He reached Miller in seconds. He didn't stop. He dropped to his knees, grabbed the back of Miller's harness, and hauled him up with one massive heave of his shoulders. "Move your ass, kid!" T-Bone yelled. They scrambled the rest of the way. They tumbled onto the gravel roof beside me, panting. "You're alive," I said, grabbing Miller's shoulder. "Check your gear. We aren't done." It took 20 minutes to get everyone across. Big Red, Sanchez, Davy, Kowalski. Finally, we were all on the Prudential roof. 8 men, but we were missing one. I grabbed my radio. "Sarah, we're across. Swing the jib, get the cab over the roof. We need to get you down." Silence. "Sarah?" "I can't, Marcus." Her voice was small, thin. I looked up. The crane was still attached to the skeleton building across the street. The cab was 200 feet above us. "What do you mean you can't? Slew the crane left. We'll drop a line." "The vibration," she said. "The slew gear is jammed. The locking pin sheared off when the building settled. I can't turn the crane, Marcus. It's stuck, pointing at the lake." My stomach dropped. She was trapped in a glass box, 600 feet in the air, on a building that was slowly sinking, and the machinery to move her was broken. "Okay," I said, forcing my voice to be steady. "Okay, don't panic. We have the acetylene. We can cut the lock. We just need to get back over there." "No," Sarah interrupted. "Look at the base, Marcus. Look at the skeleton." I walked to the edge of the roof and looked back at our construction site. The main columns, the ones rising out of the mud, were bending, not settling, bending. The mud was pushing against the side of the foundation with millions of tons of lateral pressure. The steel was yielding. "It's going to tip," Sarah said. "If you come back out here, you die." "We aren't leaving you," Miller yelled at the radio in my hand. "You have to," Sarah said. I have water up here. I have food. I'm safe for now, but you guys need to get inside. The smoke is coming." She was right. The black smoke from the gas fires was drifting towards us, a wall of choking soot. "We'll find a way," I promised. "We'll find a rope, a longer bridge. Stay on the radio. Save your battery." I clipped the radio to my belt. I couldn't look up at her. "All right," I turned to the crew. "We are on the roof of the Prudential. This is a finished building. That means HVAC, water tanks, elevator machine rooms. We need to get inside." I walked to the penthouse door. It was a heavy steel fire door, locked. "Big Red," I nodded at the door. "Knock." Big Red pulled a sledgehammer from his loop. One swing, the handle sheared the lock mechanism. The door didn't open. It hissed, a high-pitched squeal of air escaping from the crack. "What is that?" Kowalski backed up. "Is there a gas leak?" "No." I put my hand near the crack. The air was cold, and it smelled foul, like a septic tank. "It's pressure," I realized. "Positive pressure." "From the AC?" "From the mud," I said. "Think about it. The mud is filling the bottom of the building. It's displacing the air. The air has nowhere to go but up. It's compressing the whole building like a piston."
"If we open this door," I said, "it might blow us off the roof." We stood there, listening to the hiss. The building was exhaling the stench of the earth. "We have to open it," I said. "We need cover." "Stand clear," I yelled. "Miller, Sanchez, get behind the AC unit. Big Red, hit the latch again." Big Red swung. Clang. The latch gave way. Boom. The door flew open with the force of a cannon shot. It slammed against the exterior wall so hard it dented the steel. A blast of stagnant, pressurized air roared out, blowing Big Red onto his back. Dust, papers, and the smell of 1,000 sewer grates rushed past us. We covered our faces. It lasted for 10 seconds, a long, dying exhale. Then, silence. "Clear," I coughed, waving the dust away. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut into the dark stairwell. "We go down 1 floor," I said, "to the mechanical level. We find the water tank. We do not, I repeat, do not go below the 50th floor until we know how high the mud is." "You saw it in the window," Miller whispered. "The guy drowning." "Yeah," I said. "I saw it. That's why we check." We entered the stairwell. It was pristine. Painted concrete, emergency lights flickering on battery power. But the air was thick. Humidity was 100%. The walls were sweating condensation. We went down 1 flight of stairs to the 64th floor, the mechanical room. I pushed the door open. The roar of machinery was gone.
The chillers were dead, the pumps were silent. But there was a sound. Drip, drip, drip. And something else. Gurgle. The plumbing, T-Bone said, shining his light at the pipes running along the ceiling. The PVC pipes, the drainage lines, were vibrating. They're full, T-Bone said. The sewer system is backed up. The pressure is pushing the sewage back up the stack. I looked at a floor drain in the center of the room. Black sludge was bubbling up through the grate, frothing like a witch's cauldron. Don't touch it, I warned. It's raw waste mixed with the liquefaction soil. We moved deeper into the room. There, I pointed. Potable water expansion tank. It was a large silver cylinder. Sanchez, check the valve. See if we have pressure. Sanchez walked over. He tapped the gauge. Empty. The pumps failed. Gravity drained it back down. Damn it. Wait, Kowalski called out from the corner. Look at this. He was standing by the elevator doors. The doors were slightly buckled, warped outward. Listen, Kowalski said. I put my ear to the elevator door. It sounded like a waterfall, a heavy, viscous waterfall. The shaft, I whispered. The elevator shaft isn't a shaft anymore. It's a straw. The mud was rising faster inside the hollow tubes of the building than outside. The capillary action, or just the path of least resistance. This building is dying, I said. It's filling up with concrete from the inside out. So we're trapped? Miller's voice cracked. We can't go down. We can't go back to the crane. We're just waiting to be pushed off the roof? We scavenge, I said. We're in an office building. There's a cafeteria, probably on the 40th or 50th floor, break rooms, vending machines. You said don't go below 50, T-Bone reminded me. We have to take the risk. We need water, real water. I looked at the crew. They were dirty, scared, and looking at me for answers I didn't have. We split up, I said. T-Bone, Big Red, stay here. Guard the roof access. If that door blows shut, we're sealed in the dark. Keep it propped open. Watch the bridge to the skeleton. If Sarah calls, you answer. Miller, Sanchez, Kowalski, Davy, you're with me. We're going hunting. We moved into the hallway of the 64th floor. Executive offices, plush carpets, mahogany desks, views of the lake, or where the lake used to be. Now the view was just gray steam rising from the mud ocean. I kicked open a door to a corner office. Check the mini fridges, I ordered. Rich guys always have sparkling water. We ransacked the office. Jackpot. A case of Perrier under a desk, a half bottle of scotch, a bag of pretzels. It's a start, I said, cracking a bottle of water. It fizzed. I downed it in one gulp. It tasted like heaven. Boss, Sanchez called from the window. You need to see this. I walked over. He was pointing down at the shoreline, the place where the mud met the steel of our building 60 stories down. The level, Sanchez said. It's rising, fast. I looked. He was right. When we crossed the bridge, the mud was at the 20th floor. Now I could see the number painted on the side of the neighboring parking garage, which was almost gone. It was at the 30th floor. 10 stories in 30 minutes. It's not just settling, it's swelling. The chemical reaction, maybe the limestone foundation is reacting with the lake water. It's expanding. At this rate, Sanchez did the math, it hits the roof in 3 hours. We don't have 3 hours, I said. We have to move higher. Higher? Miller asked. We're on the roof, Marcus. There is no higher. I looked out the window. The skyline was a graveyard, but in the distance, looming over the fog and smoke, was the Willis Tower, the tallest point in the city. The antennas reached 1,400 feet. It was a mile away. We need to get to the Willis, I said. It's the only thing that's going to stay above the tide line. A mile? Kowalski scoffed. Across that? We can't walk on the mud. You said yourself. It's a crust over liquid. We don't walk, I said. We swing. Swing? Zip lines, high-tension cable. We have thousands of feet of it on the crane across the street. If we can get that cable... The crane that Sarah's trapped in? Yeah, that one. My radio crackled. Marcus? It was Sarah, but her voice was different, urgent. Go ahead, Sarah. There's something on the roof with you. I froze. I signaled the guys to be quiet. Repeat, Sarah. We are on the 64th floor. Who is on the roof? I can see the roof from up here, she said. I see T-Bone in Big Red by the door. But there's something coming up the side of the building, on the glass. A climber? No, she said. It looks like mud, but it's moving against gravity. It's crawling up the window frames. I ran back to the stairwell. Up, back to the roof. We sprinted up the stairs. We burst out onto the roof deck. T-Bone and Big Red were standing by the parapet, looking down over the edge. "Get back!" I yelled. "Marcus, look at this!" Big Red pointed. I ran over, keeping my distance. A black, viscous tendril was hooking over the edge of the limestone cap. It looked like a slug, the size of a man's leg. It was pulsing. It wasn't mud. I looked closer. It was rats. Thousands of them, coated in the tar-like sludge, glued together by the viscous fluid. They were moving as a swarm, a living carpet of drowning, panicked vermin climbing the tower to escape the rising earth. They were climbing over each other, forming a ladder of bodies. The ones on the bottom were crushed against the glass, acting as mortar for the ones on top. "Oh, God!" Miller retched. The mass spilled over the parapet, a wave of black slime and biting teeth. "Fire!" I yelled. "Use the acetylene!" Big Red grabbed the welding torch from the cart we had dragged across. He sparked the striker. Whoosh! The flame jet roared to life. He swept it across the parapet. The rats screamed, a high collective shriek that sounded like grinding metal. The sludge coating them caught fire. It was flammable. The methane in the mud. The rat wave ignited. A fireball rolled along the edge of the roof. Burning rats scattered, running frantically across the gravel. "Kick 'em off!" I grabbed a shovel. "Don't let them touch you!" We fought the swarm. It was a nightmare of fire and fur. I smashed a burning clump of them with the shovel. They burst apart, revealing writhing bodies underneath. They weren't attacking us. They were just running. They were terrified. "The edge!" I yelled. "Clear the edge!" Big Red torched the climbing column of vermin. The line broke. The flaming mass fell back down the side of the building, 60 stories of fire raining into the mud ocean. We stood there, panting, the smell of burnt hair and ozone filling the air. "They're coming up," I said, wiping sweat from my eyes. "Everything is coming up. The rats, the bugs, the people. We are standing on the last life raft." I looked across the gap at the skeleton building, the crane. "Sarah," I radioed, "are you seeing this?" "I see the fire," she said. "Marcus, the skeleton is moving. The vibrations are back." I felt it through the soles of my boots again. Hum. The harmonic tremor. "The Prudential building is shaking too," I said. "The rats knew. Animals always know before we do." "Marcus!" Sarah screamed. I looked up. The skeleton building, our construction site, groaned. The main vertical columns buckled. It didn't fall like a tree. It twisted. The torque of the sinking mud spun the foundation. The 60-story steel frame corkscrewed. The bridge, the beam we had walked across, screeched as it ground against the Prudential roof. "Get back from the bridge!" I tackled Miller, shoving him away. Crunch. The beam sheared off the roof edge. It fell. The connection to the crane snapped. I watched in horror as the skeletal tower lurched away from us. And the crane with Sarah inside, detached from the top of the steel frame. It didn't fall straight down. It swung. Top-heavy, the massive red boom swung like a pendulum, crashing toward us. "Impact!" I screamed. "Cover!" We dove behind the heavy AC units. The boom of the crane smashed into the side of the Prudential building, 5 floors below us. Crash! Glass shattered. Steel shrieked. The whole building shook like it had been hit by a bomb. I looked over the parapet. The crane boom was embedded in the side of our building like a spear. The cab, the glass box where Sarah was dangling precariously from the twisted metal, suspended over the abyss, lodged in the broken windows of the 55th floor. "Sarah!" I screamed into the radio. "Sarah!" Static. Then a cough. I'm here." "Don't move," I said. "Don't you move a muscle." The crane cab was hanging by a thread of hydraulic lines and bent steel. We were cut off from the skeleton. The rats were at the gates. The mud was rising, and our crane operator was dangling 5 floors down. I stood up. "Okay," I said. My voice was calm, the scary kind of calm. "We need that cable, and we need Sarah." "How?" T-Bone asked. "We can't fly." I looked at the window cleaning rig parked on the roof, a motorized scaffold platform. We don't fly, I said. We rappel over the side. I walked over to the rig. Miller, check the motors. Kowalski, get the rope. We're going over the side. Into the rat nest? Miller asked. The rats are gone, I said. Gravity took them. Now it's our turn to fight gravity. I looked at the sun. It was getting lower. The sky was turning a bruised purple. We have 2 hours of daylight. We get Sarah, we get the cable, and we rig a line to the Willis Tower, or we die trying. I looked across the horizon. The mud was bubbling. Huge bubbles, the size of cars, were bursting on the surface of the sludge. Something else was waking up down there. Let's go to work.
Fear is a funny thing. When the ground falls away, you think the fear will be falling. But for a guy like me, a high steel man, the fear isn't the fall, it's the stop. But today, looking over the edge of the Prudential building, I wasn't afraid of the stop. I was afraid of the soup. The window washing rig was a flimsy aluminum basket suspended by 2 steel cables. It swung in the wind, banging against the limestone facade. Clang! Clang! Get in, I told T-Bone. This rig is rated for 2 guys and a bucket of water, T-Bone said, kicking the metal grating of the floor. Not 2 guys, a rescue, and a winch cable. That's why we leave the bucket, I said. Lock your harnesses. If this basket goes, we dangle. I worked the controls. The motors hummed, a high-pitched whine that sounded too weak for the job. We descended. The roofline rose above us. The sky narrowed. We were dropping into the canyon. Level 60, level 59. The wind was worse down here. It funneled between the buildings, creating a Venturi effect. The basket swung out, away from the building, spinning us in a slow, nauseating circle. Steady! T-Bone grabbed the guide wire. I see it, I yelled. Level 55, the crash site. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The red boom of the crane was jammed into the corner of the building like a giant, jagged toothpick. It had smashed through the glass curtain wall and crushed 2 structural columns. The floor slab of the 55th floor was sagging, crumbling under the weight of the machinery, and hanging from the tip of the bent boom was the cab. It was dangling by a bundle of hydraulic hoses and 1 twisted strut. It swung gently, scraping against the broken glass of the floor below. "Sarah!" I screamed over the wind. I saw movement inside the cab. A hand pressed against the cracked plexiglass. "She's alive," T-Bone exhaled. "Okay, boss. How do we play this?" "We can't get the basket close enough," I judged the distance. The crane boom stuck out 20 feet from the building. We were flush with the wall. "We have to swing," I said. "Swing?" "I'm going to kick off the wall," I said. We build momentum. On the apex of the swing, one of us jumps to the cab. T-Bone looked at the gap. Then he looked at the mud ocean 50 stories down. The smell of the methane was stronger here. It made my eyes water. "I'll jump," T-Bone said. "You catch us." "No, I'm lighter. You run the winch. You catch me." I climbed onto the railing of the basket. I held the suspension wire with one hand. "On 3, I said. We rocked the basket. 1, we kicked the wall. 2, the basket swung out, showing us the terrifying drop. 3, I launched myself. For a second, I was flying. No steel under my boots, just air and the smell of rot. I hit the crane cab. Thud. I grabbed the metal grating of the walkway. The impact made the whole wreckage shudder. The hydraulic hose holding the cab groaned, a wet, rubbery stretching sound. "Don't move!" Sarah screamed from inside. "It's slipping!" I froze. I hung there, my fingers digging into the diamond plate steel. I watched a bolt shear off the connection point above me and fall. It didn't hit the ground. It vanished into the fog of the street. "Open the door, Sarah," I whispered. "It's jammed," she sobbed. "The frame is bent." I pulled my spud wrench. I smashed the window. The safety glass shattered into 1,000 diamonds. I reached in. Sarah was slumped over the controls. Blood was running down her forehead, matting her hair. Her leg was pinned under the control stick. "I got you," I said, climbing halfway in. The cab tilted. "Easy, easy." I leveraged the wrench against the dash and bent the stick back. She cried out, a sharp sound of pain. "Legs broken," I noted. "Tib-fib fracture. You're going to pass out, Sarah, but not yet, not yet." I dragged her out of the seat.
She was small, but dead weight is heavy. "T-Bone!" I yelled. "Bring it in!" T-Bone timed the swing of the basket perfectly. He came swooping in. He didn't try to grab the cab. That would knock us off. He threw a line. A yellow nylon strap whizzed through the air. I caught it. I clipped it to Sarah's harness. "Holler!" T-Bone engaged the winch on his end. The strap went taut. Sarah was pulled out of the cab, swinging into the void. T-Bone grabbed her by the vest and dragged her into the basket. "Got her!" he yelled. "Now you!" "Not yet," I yelled back. "Marcus, the hose is ripping." "I need the cable," I pointed to the winch drum behind the cab. The crane had 1,000 feet of 5/8-inch steel cable on the main drum, high tensile, unbreakable. If we were going to zip line to the Willis, we needed this wire. "It's too heavy," T-Bone shouted. "I'm not taking the whole drum," I said. "I'm cutting the lead." I scrambled over the top of the cab to the machinery housing. I found the cable. It was under tension. I took my bolt cutters from my belt. I clamped them onto the steel wire. I squeezed. My forearms burned. The wire was thick. Snap. The cable whipped back, slicing the air inches from my face. I grabbed the loose end. I tied it to my belt. "Okay." I stood up on the wreckage. "Bring me home."
T-Bone swung the basket again. I jumped. I landed hard in the bottom of the aluminum cage, landing on top of the coiled rope. The moment my weight left the crane cab, the balance shifted. The hydraulic hose finally gave up. Rip. The cab plummeted. We watched it go. It fell silently into the fog. There was no crash, just a wet plip sound, like a pebble dropped in a pond 5 seconds later. "Go up," I panted. "Go up now!" The little motor whined. We ascended. The wind tried to batter us, but we held on. Sarah was unconscious now, her head in T-Bone's lap. I held the end of the steel cable, feeding it out as we rose, the slack trailing down to the wreck below. We hit the roof. Hands grabbed us. Miller, Sanchez, Kowalski. They pulled us onto the gravel. "Medic!" I yelled. "Stabilize her leg. Use a piece of conduit for a splint. Duct tape." I collapsed against the AC unit, my lungs burning. I looked at the steel cable in my hand. "We got the line!" I wheezed. "We got the bridge!" Night fell fast. The city without power is a darker place than you can imagine. Usually there's ambient light, sky glow. Now there was nothing, just the stars above and the black void below. We huddled in the stairwell of the 64th floor. It was warmer there. Sarah was awake, pale, drugged on the painkillers from the first aid kit we found in the office. "Willis Tower," I said, shining my flashlight on a map I'd drawn on the wall with a Sharpie. "It's a mile away, Marcus," Kowalski said. "We have 1,000 feet of cable. Do the math." "We don't go straight there," I said. "We island hop." I traced a line. Prudential to the Aeon Center. That's a short hop, maybe 300 feet. Then Aeon to the Blue Cross building. Then Blue Cross to the Chase Tower. Then Willis. "That's 4 jumps," Miller said. 4 times we have to rig a line. 4 times we have to slide over the death soup. "You got a better idea?" I asked. "The mud is at the 35th floor now. I checked the elevator shaft. You can hear it rising. It sounds like a stomach growling." "How do we get the line across?" Sanchez asked. "We can't throw it 300 feet. I reached into my bag and pulled out the modification I'd been working on for the last hour. A Hilti powder-actuated rivet gun. Usually, it shoots steel nails into concrete using a .27 caliber blank cartridge. I had taped a fishing reel, a heavy-duty deep-sea reel found in the CEO's office, to the barrel. "We shoot a pilot line," I said. "Fishing line. Then we use that to pull a paracord. Then the paracord pulls the rope. Then the rope pulls the steel cable." "A harpoon!" T-Bone grinned. "I like it." We moved back to the roof. The wind had died down, which was good for shooting, but bad for the smell. The stench was thick now, oily. I walked to the edge, facing the Aeon Center. The Aeon is a massive white monolith of stone. It looked like a tombstone rising out of the black ocean. "I need a target," I said. "I can't shoot into stone." "The windows," Miller said. "Shoot through a window." "At this distance? If I miss, we lose the line." I aimed the Hilti gun. "Lightning!" I ordered. All 5 flashlights focused on the Aeon Center, 300 feet away. The beams converged on a dark square of glass on the 60th floor. "Clear back," I said. I braced the gun against the parapet. I aimed high to account for the arc. Bang! The gun kicked. The fishing line whirred off the reel.
singing a high-pitched note. Zzz. We watched the line fly. It disappeared into the dark. Then, tink, faint, distant. "Hit," Kowalski whispered. "But did it stick?" I reeled in slowly. There was tension. "It snagged," I said. "Or it punched through." I pulled harder. It held. "Okay, start the chain. Tie on the paracord." It took 2 hours to pull the cable across. It was exhausting work, hand over hand, but finally, the heavy steel cable was spanned between the two buildings. We anchored our end to the structural I-beams of the roof AC unit. "Who goes first?" Miller asked. "I do. I have to secure the anchor on the other side. Right now, it's just snagged on broken glass. It won't hold a person's weight if it slips." "So you're sliding on a thread?" "I'm sliding on faith." I clipped a pulley onto the steel cable. I hooked my harness to the pulley. I stood on the parapet. The Aeon Center was a dark void ahead. "Give me the brake," I told T-Bone. He held a rope attached to my back to control my speed. "If I stop in the middle, don't come get me. Cut the line. Save yourselves." "Shut up, Marcus. Go." I stepped off. Whoosh! Gravity took me. The pulley screamed on the wire. The wind rushed in my ears. I flew over the gap. I looked down. The fog had cleared for a second. I saw the surface of the mud. It was illuminated by light? Not fire. Bioluminescence. Blue and green swirls in the sludge, like algae blooming in a toxic swamp. And in the light, I saw shapes. Huge shapes. Long serpentine ridges breaking the surface, like the backs of whales but made of rock and soil. The earth wasn't just liquid. It was churning. The currents were moving fast, swirling around the base of the buildings, eroding them. Crash! I hit the window of the Aeon Center feet first. The glass shattered. I swung inside, tumbling onto a carpeted floor. "Safe!" I yelled into the radio. "I'm in!" I stood up and brushed the glass off. I was in a conference room. I shone my light around. There were people. Skeletons? No, fresh bodies. 3 of them, sitting at the conference table. They weren't decomposed. They were dry, mummified, gray, like the moisture had been sucked out of them instantly. "Marcus?" T-Bone's voice in my ear. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, staring at the gray figures. "But this building isn't empty, and I don't think we're alone." I secured the cable to a structural column. "Send Sarah," I ordered. "Then the supplies." I walked closer to the bodies. They were wearing suits. Office workers. I touched one. The skin crumbled like dry clay. On the table in front of them was a notepad. One word was scrawled on it, over and over again. Thirst. 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 I backed away. "What happened here?" I whispered. The humidity in the room was 0. My throat felt instantly dry. The air was sucking the moisture right out of my eyes. Desiccant, I realized. The chemical reaction. The liquefaction isn't just releasing water, it's absorbing it from the atmosphere above. That's why the mud was hardening. It was hygroscopic. It was pulling the water out of the air, out of the buildings, out of the people. If we stayed here too long, we wouldn't drown. We would turn to dust. One by one, the crew zipped across. We gathered in the conference room. "Don't touch them," I warned Sanchez, who was looking at the mummies. "They look like statues," he whispered. "Drink water," I ordered. "Everyone, ration or not, drink now. This air is a vampire." We moved to the stairwell of the Aeon Center. We needed to get to the west side of the building to set up the next jump to the Blue Cross Tower. We walked down the corridor. Scrape. 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 The sound came from the ceiling, above the drop tiles. We froze. "Rats?" Miller asked, raising his shovel. "Too heavy," I said. Crunch! A ceiling tile 20 feet ahead of us exploded. Something dropped down. It wasn't a rat, and it wasn't a person. It was gray. A humanoid shape, but elongated. Its limbs were too long with extra joints. Its skin was the color of the dry mud, matte gray, cracked like a desert floor. It didn't have a face, just a vertical slit where the mouth and nose should be. It stood on all fours, crouched like a spider. It turned its head toward us. The slit opened. Sssss. The sound was like sand pouring on metal. "What is that?" T-Bone raised the sledgehammer. "It's one of them," I whispered. "The people, the dried ones. It didn't die. It changed." The creature twitched. It moved with blinding speed, skittering up the wall, its claws digging into the drywall. "Run!" I yelled. "Back to the stairs!" We scrambled back into the fire stairwell and slammed the heavy steel door. Bam! Something hit the door from the other side, hard, the metal dented. Scrape, scrape. "It's trying to open the latch," Kowalski said, backing up. "Jam it!" I ordered. "Use the pry bar." T-Bone jammed a crowbar under the handle. We stood there, breathing hard. The air was dry, scratching our throats. "What was that, Marcus?" Sarah asked from the stretcher we'd made. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Mudmen," Miller whispered. "Golems." "Dehydration," I said, trying to keep the science in my head to ward off the madness. "Extreme dehydration causing delirium, muscle spasms. Maybe the silica in the dust is coating their skin." "It crawled up the wall, Marcus!" Miller yelled. "That's not dehydration, that's a monster." "It doesn't matter what it is," I said. "It's between us and the Willis Tower." I looked at the map. "We can't cross this floor. We have to go up, to the roof. We jump from the roof." "The roof is 80 stories up," T-Bird said. "The wind will be hurricane force." "Better the wind than that," I pointed at the dented door. We started climbing, flight after flight. But as we climbed, I heard it. Not from the door below, from the vents. The scraping sound was in the HVAC ducts. It was following us. And it wasn't alone. I heard chattering, dozens of them. The dry ones were hunting. We were climbing the spine of the Aeon Center, 83 stories of white stone. We were currently at floor 68, 15 floors to the roof. It doesn't sound like much, but when you're carrying a wounded woman, 3 tanks of acetylene, and 50 pounds of steel cable, and the air is sucking the water out of your blood, it's Everest. "Keep moving," I rasped. My tongue felt like sandpaper. "Don't stop." Miller was carrying the back of Sarah's stretcher. He was crying, not from sadness, but from dust. His tear ducts were working overtime to flush the silica from his eyes, leaving streaks of mud on his face. Scrape, scrape. The sound in the vents was keeping pace with us. "They're faster than us," T-Bone whispered, looking at the rectangular HVAC grate above the landing. "They're moving vertically," I said, "using the risers. We have to take the turns." Bang! The grate above us rattled. A gray finger, long, multi-jointed, poked through the slats. It tested the metal. "Move!" I shoved T-Bone. We scrambled up the next flight. Behind us, the grate gave way with a screech of tearing metal. I didn't look back. I just heard the thump, thump, thump of dry feet hitting the concrete landing. "Block it!" I yelled. Kowalski was the rear guard. He stopped at the turn. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount. He waited. A shape unfolded itself from the shadows of the landing below. Gray, skeletal. It opened its vertical mouth to hiss. Kowalski swung the extinguisher. Clang! He hit the creature in the head. It didn't bleed. It cracked, like hitting a ceramic pot. Dust puffed out of the fracture in its skull. The creature staggered back, losing its grip on the wall. It tumbled down the stairs, knocking into the 2 others behind it. "Go! Go! Go!" Kowalski sprinted up to join us. Floor 80. My legs were burning. My heart was hammering against my ribs, struggling to pump thick, dehydrated blood. "Almost there," I choked out. "The roof door." We reached the top landing. A heavy steel door marked roof access. It was locked. "Big Red!" I stepped aside. Big Red didn't have the energy to swing the sledgehammer. He just leaned against the door, panting. I can't," he wheezed. "Give it to me." T-Bone grabbed the hammer. Wham! The lock held. Wham! The handle bent. From the stairs below us, the hissing grew louder. A chorus of dry throats. They were swarming. "Blow it," I said. "Use the torch." Sanchez fired up the cutting torch. The blue flame hissed. He jammed it into the lock mechanism. Molten metal dripped onto his boots. He didn't flinch. Come on, come on! The steel glowed cherry red, then white. Kick! I booted the door. It swung open. The wind hit us like a physical blow. We spilled out onto the roof of the Aeon Center. It was a flat, gravel-covered expanse, massive and desolate. The wind up here, 1,100 feet in the air, was ferocious. It instantly dried the sweat on our skin, sending a chill into our bones. "Seal the door!" I yelled. T-Bone and Big Red slammed the door shut. They jammed the crowbar through the handle and piled a stack of roofing tiles against it. "That won't hold them for long," T-Bone shouted over the gale. I looked at the view. If I thought the city looked dead from the Prudential, from here it looked alien. The Aeon is tall. We were looking down on almost everything. The moon had come out, cutting through the smoke. The mud ocean below was glowing. Bioluminescence. Vast swirls of neon blue and sickly green were churning in the sludge. The bacteria were feasting on the organic matter of the dead city, blooming in the chemical soup. It was beautiful and terrifying. Blue Cross Building, I pointed south. That's the target. The Blue Cross Blue Shield Tower. It was much shorter, only 57 stories. We were at 83. "That's a steep drop," Miller shouted, looking at the angle. "That's not a zip line, Marcus. That's a base jump." Gravity is fuel. We need the speed to clear the gap. It's almost 600 feet of distance. "Set up the Hilti," I ordered. We dragged the gear to the south edge of the roof. Bam! 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 The sound of heavy impacts on the roof door behind us. The steel was bulging outwards. "They're coming!" Sarah screamed from the stretcher. "Buy me time," I yelled to the crew. "I need 5 minutes to rig the anchor." "We got you, boss." T-Bone picked up his sledgehammer. Big Red grabbed a shovel. Kowalski held the fire extinguisher. They formed a line in front of the door. The ironworkers' Local 63 defense line. I knelt by the parapet. I loaded the rivet gun. I aimed for the roof of the Blue Cross building below. It was a wide target, covered with mechanical penthouses. "Steady," I whispered. My hands were shaking from the cold and thirst. Pop! The fishing line flew. It arced down, vanishing into the dark. I watched the spool. It stopped spinning. Did we hit? I tugged. Resistance. "We're on! Pull the paracord!" Crash! The roof door flew off its hinges. They poured out, the dry ones. Under the moonlight, they looked even worse. Their skin was stretched tight over their bones, translucent and gray. Their eyes were sunk in pits. They didn't run. They scuttled, low to the ground, using their long arms to pull themselves forward against the wind. "Hold the line!" T-Bone roared. He swung the sledgehammer. It connected with the first creature, shattering its ribcage. Dust sprayed into the wind, but 2 more jumped over the fallen one. Big Red swung his shovel like a baseball bat, decapitating one, but they were fast. One of them leaped onto Kowalski's back. It didn't bite. It hugged him. It wrapped its arms and legs around him, pressing its dry, cracked chest against his jacket. "Get it off!" Kowalski screamed. "It's burning! It's hot!" They were heat sinks. They were trying to absorb his body heat and moisture through osmosis. Sanchez blasted it with the cutting torch. The creature screeched, a sound like tearing metal, and let go, flailing away with its back on fire. "Pull!" I yelled at Miller, who was helping me with the line. "Don't look at them! Pull the cable!" We hauled the paracord, then the rope. The steel cable was heavy. It dragged over the limestone edge, sparking. "We need the anchor!" I shouted. I wrapped the cable around a massive steel davit arm used for the window washing rig. I clamped it with 3 heavy U-bolts. "Tighten it down! Use the impact gun!" Zip, zip, zip. The bolts locked home. The line was set. It vanished into the darkness at a 45-degree angle down to the Blue Cross roof. "Ready!" I yelled. I turned to the fight. It was a losing battle. There were too many of them. Dozens were spilling out of the stairwell. Kowalski was on his knees. 2 of them were on him now. They were burying him. "Help him!" Sarah cried. I pulled the flare gun from the emergency kit. I fired point blank into the pile on top of Kowalski. The magnesium flare ignited. The dry ones hated the light. No, They were flammable, so dry they were like kindling. The creatures burst into flames. They scattered, screeching. Kowalski rolled away, his jacket smoking. He looked pale, shriveled. They had already sucked sap from him. "Go!" I grabbed Sarah's harness. "She goes first. T-Bone, send her." We clipped the pulley to the cable. We clipped Sarah to the pulley. "Brake line?" T-Bone asked. "No brake line," I said. "It's too far. The rope will snag. She has to free fall." "She'll hit the other side at 50 miles an hour." "Better than being eaten," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "Push me." T-Bone shoved. Zzz. The sound of the metal pulley on the cable was a scream. Sarah vanished into the dark, a rapidly shrinking silhouette against the glowing mud below. We waited. 5 seconds, 10. We couldn't hear the landing over the wind. Then a rhythmic tug on the cable. 3 pulls. She made it, I exhaled. "Miller, go!" Miller clipped on. He jumped. "Sanchez, Big Red!" They went. The dry ones were regrouping. The fire had died down. They were circling us, wary of the torch, but getting bolder. "Kowalski, you're up," I said. Kowalski tried to stand. He stumbled. "I can't. Legs are cramping. Too dry." I grabbed him. "T-Bone, help me." We dragged him to the edge. We clipped him on. "Hold on, brother," T-Bone said. He slapped Kowalski on the helmet. "See you on the other side." We pushed him. He slid away. Just me and T-Bone left, and about 30 monsters. They formed a semicircle, cutting us off from the anchor point. "We got a problem, boss." T-Bone hefted his hammer. "They know what we're doing. They're guarding the exit." I looked at the cable. It was 10 feet away, behind a wall of gray ghouls. "We rush 'em," I said, shoulder to shoulder. I'm out of acetylene. Wait, Sanchez was gone. It was just me and T-Bone. I had the Hilti gun. T-Bone had the hammer. "I'll make a hole," T-Bone said. "You run." We both run. On 3. 1, 2, screech! A massive dry one, larger than the others, dropped from the top of the elevator housing. It landed right on the anchor point. It looked at us. It put a hand on the steel cable. It tilted its head. It gnawed on the cable. "It's gonna cut the line," I realized. Their teeth were hard enough to chew through aluminum. Maybe they could damage the strands. "Kill it!" T-Bone roared. He charged. He didn't swing the hammer. He threw it. The 10-pound sledge flew through the air. It hit the alpha creature square in the chest, knocking it off the cable. But T-Bone was exposed. The pack swarmed him. "No!" I raised the Hilti gun. I fired a rivet into the crowd. Useless. "Go, Marcus!" T-Bone yelled. He was disappearing under a pile of gray limbs. "Go! The line won't hold!" I saw sparks flying from the anchor point. The creature had damaged the strands. The cable was unraveling.
I had a choice. Die with him or save the others. It's the choice every foreman dreads, but the choice is always the same. The job comes first. The survivors come first. I ran. I sprinted past the pile of writhing bodies. A claw swiped at my leg, tearing my pants, scratching my calf. I felt a stinging burn, desiccation instantly setting in at the wound site. I reached the edge. I didn't have time to clip a safety line. I just hooked the pulley on. I grabbed the handles. I jumped. As I fell away from the roof, I looked back. T-Bone was gone. But the roof was flashing with blue light. The electrical box. He must have knocked it over into a puddle of water? No, there was no water. Then I saw the spark. T-Bone had a flare in his vest. Boom! A white flower of magnesium fire engulfed the roof edge. Then, the darkness took me. The speed was terrifying. The wind roared. The Aeon Center receded. The Blue Cross building rushed up at me like a wall. The angle was too steep. I was coming in too hot. "Brake!" I screamed at myself. I twisted my leather gloves around the cable behind the pulley. Smoke. The leather burned instantly. The heat seared my palms. I screamed but didn't let go. Screech! I slowed down. A little. The roof was coming. "Catch him!" I heard Sarah yell. I hit the mattress. They had piled up seat cushions from a lounge. I slammed into them at 30 miles an hour. I bounced, tumbled, and skidded across the gravel roof of the Blue Cross building. I hit a vent pipe and stopped. Everything went black for a second. "Marcus! Marcus!" Water. Someone was pouring water on my face. I sputtered. I opened my eyes. Miller and Big Red were standing over me. "T-Bone?" Big Red asked. He looked at the empty cable behind me. I sat up. My hands were wrapped in shreds of burnt leather. My leg was throbbing.
I looked back at the Aeon Center. A small fire was burning on the roof, 1,100 feet up. He held the door, I whispered. Silence on the roof. The wind whistled through the tension cables of the building. He's gone, I said, my voice hardening. Cut the line. What? Cut the line, I ordered, before those things figure out how to slide down it. Sanchez took the bolt cutters. He snapped the cable. The wire whipped away, falling into the abyss. The bridge was gone. We were on the Blue Cross building, island number 3, 57 stories tall. Check the perimeter, I said, struggling to my feet. This roof is different. It was. The Blue Cross building has a large green roof, a garden, trees, grass. Or it used to be. Now the trees were black skeletons, the grass was gray powder. But in the center of the garden... "Marcus!" Sarah called out. She was propped up against a planter. "Look at the plants!" I walked over. Among the dead gray grass, there were new shoots. Not green, blue. Bioluminescent blue vines were growing out of the soil. They were pulsating. "It's the same stuff as in the mud," I said. "The infection, it's reached the roof." "Does that mean the mud is inside this building too?" Miller asked. "No," I said. "It means the spores are airborne, or the birds brought it. We aren't just fighting the ground anymore. The biosphere is changing." I walked to the south edge. Next jump, Chase Tower. I looked south. The Chase Tower was there, distinctive curve. But between us and the Chase was the park, Millennium Park, or what was left of it. The bean, Cloud Gate, was still there. It was a silver bubble floating on the mud, and around it, lights, I whispered. "Fires?" Sanchez asked. "No, electric lights." I squinted. On the roof of the Art Institute, just south of us, a low, sprawling building. It should have been swallowed, but it wasn't. It was walled. I saw barricades. Sandbags? No, cars, piled up. And inside the perimeter, floodlights. "Survivors," Miller said. "Real survivors, with power." "They aren't sinking." "Why aren't they sinking? That building is heavy stone." I looked closer through the binoculars for my back. The mud around the Art Institute wasn't liquid. It was frozen. White frost covered the sludge in a perfect circle around the building. "They froze the ground," I said. "How the hell did they freeze the ground?" "Liquid nitrogen?" Sarah suggested. "The Art Institute? Climate control for the paintings? Maybe. If they have a way to stabilize the soil, we don't need to go to the Willis. We need to go there." "It's down," Big Red said. "Way down. We're at 57. That roof is maybe 5 stories above the mud." "That's a long slide," I said. "And if we miss, we land in the soup." I looked at the blue vines growing on the roof, then at the frost-ringed fortress below. "Change of plans," I said. "We aren't going to the Willis. We're going to the museum." "Boss!" Kowalski's voice was weak. He was sitting on a bench. I walked over. "You okay?" "My arm," he said. "Where that thing grabbed me." He rolled up his sleeve. The skin wasn't just dry. It was turning gray, cracking. And in the cracks, faint blue light was shining. The infection. "It burns, Marcus. It feels like I'm full of sand." I looked at the others. We were all exposed. We all had cuts, scrapes, dust in our lungs. We need a doctor. And maybe the museum has one. I looked back at the fortress of ice and art. "We rig the long line, all the cable we have left. It's our last shot." I looked at the moon, and we do it fast, because I think Kowalski is hatching.
We were on the roof of the Blue Cross building, 57 stories up. The target, the Art Institute, was a mile south and 50 stories down. "It's too steep," Sanchez said, looking at the angle. "That's a 45-degree slope. Without a brake, we hit the bottom at terminal velocity. We'll be paced on the museum steps." "We make brakes," I said, looking at my ruined hands. "Leather belts, thick rubber from the roof lining, anything to increase friction." I looked at Kowalski. He was sitting on the edge of a planter box. The gray cracking skin had spread up his neck to his jawline.
The blue light pulsing in his veins matched the rhythm of the alien vines around us. "I can hear it," Kowalski whispered. His eyes were milky white. "Hear what, buddy?" Miller asked, kneeling beside him. "The soup," Kowalski smiled, his lips splitting with a dry crack. "It's singing. It wants us to join the mix. It says we're too wet. We need to dry out." "We're getting you a doctor," I said, my voice tight. "Hold on." I grabbed Miller. "He goes in the middle. Sandwich him between you and Sanchez. If he tries to let go, you clip him to you." "He's turning into one of those things, Marcus," Miller hissed. "If he turns while we're on the wire." "Then cut him loose," I said, but not before. We stripped the roof of materials. We cut strips of thick EPDM rubber roofing membrane to wrap around the cable as drag chutes. I rigged the anchor point to the building's window washing davit. The cable hissed as we pulled it taut. It was a thin steel thread disappearing into the glowing fog below. "I go first," I said. "I have to clear the landing zone. If that ice is slippery, you guys will slide right off into the mud." I wrapped my hands in layers of rubber and duct tape. I clipped on. "Radio check," I said. "Loud and clear," Sanchez said. I looked at Sarah. She was pale, shivering. "You're next, Sarah. Big Red has you." I stepped to the edge. The smell hit me. Not the sewage smell. The smell of cold, crisp, sharp air rising from the Art Institute. It smelled like a freezer door opening in a slaughterhouse. "See you on the ice," I said. I jumped. The drop was sickening. The moment I left the roof, my stomach hit my throat. I accelerated instantly. Woo! The pulley screamed. I clamped my rubber-wrapped hands onto the cable behind the wheel to brake. Smoke trailed behind me. The rubber melted, smelling of burning tires. I was flying over the park. Below me, the mud whales, those massive ridges of earth, were breaching. I saw one rise up right under my path. A mouth like a dredger bucket opened, dripping with neon sludge. It snapped at my boots, missing by 20 feet. Faster, I thought, easing off the brake. I plummeted toward the ring of white frost. The Art Institute was coming up fast. It looked like a fortress carved out of a glacier. The mud around it was frozen into jagged waves, stopped in mid-churn. "Brace for impact!" I saw the barricade of frozen cars. I aimed for a gap between a bus and a snowdrift. Thud! I hit the ice. I didn't stick. I slid. I skidded across the frozen mud, spinning out of control. The ice was hard as concrete but slick as glass. I smashed into the fender of a frozen taxi. I stopped. I lay there, gasping. The air was frigid. My breath plumed in white clouds. I checked my limbs. Nothing broken. "Clear!" I yelled into the radio. "Landing zone is ice. Watch your speed!" I stood up and unclipped. I was standing on the steps of the Art Institute. The famous bronze lions were there. They were covered in frost. And something else. The lion on the left had a spear through its chest. A makeshift spear, a sharpened rebar pole. And impaled on it was a dry one. The creature was frozen solid, its gray limbs twisted in agony. "Warning sign," I whispered. "Halt!" A voice boomed from the darkness of the entrance. I squinted against the floodlights. 3 figures emerged from the museum doors. They were wearing heavy winter coats, balaclavas, and hockey pads? Improvised armor. They held weapons, not guns, flamethrowers. Modified garden sprayers with pilot lights. "Hands where we can see 'em!" the lead guard shouted. I raised my taped hands. "I'm Marcus, Ironworkers Local 63. I have injured people coming down the line. Don't shoot." "Local 63? The guard lowered the nozzle slightly. "Skywalkers?" "Yeah, we came from the Blue Cross roof." The guard looked up at the cable. "You're coming in hot," he muttered. "Open the gates! Get the crash pads!" The next 10 minutes were a blur of arrivals. Sarah and Big Red came down fast. They hit the pile of mattresses the guards threw onto the ice. Then Sanchez and Miller. And finally, Kowalski. He came down alone. He wasn't braking. "He's coming too fast," I yelled. Zzz. Crunch! Kowalski hit the mattresses hard. He tumbled, rolling onto the ice. He didn't get up. He writhed, screaming, "It burns! The cold! It burns!" The dry ones hate the cold? No, the infection hates it. The cold was shocking his system. The guards raised their flamethrowers. "Infected!" one yelled. "Burn him!" "No!" I jumped in front of the nozzle. "He's alive! He's one of us!" "Look at his skin!" the guard shouted. "He's glowing blue! That's a spore carrier!" "He's a man!" I roared. "And we need a doctor!" The lead guard stepped forward. He pulled down his mask. An older guy, grizzled beard. "I'm Captain Davies," he said. "We don't let the blue rot inside." "He helped save us," I said, staring Davies in the eye. "If you burn him, you burn all of us." Davies looked at my crew, at Sarah on the stretcher, at Big Red holding his sledgehammer menacingly. "Quarantine," Davies said. "We have a freezer unit in the loading dock. We put him on ice. Literally. It slows the transformation." "Do it," I said. They dragged Kowalski away. He was thrashing, his screams echoing off the stone lions. "Welcome to the fridge," Davies said. "Come inside before you freeze your lungs." We entered the Art Institute. The transition was jarring. Outside was a frozen apocalypse. Inside was a museum. The grand hall was dimly lit, but warm. The grand staircase was intact, but the art was different. The paintings, the Monets, the Seurats were gone. The frames were empty. Instead, the walls were covered in plastic sheeting. And the floor? The floor was a maze of cables and hoses. Liquid nitrogen tanks were everywhere, venting white gas. "What is this place?" Miller asked, looking around. "Survival," Davies said. "We realized early on that the mud is biological. It's alive. And like most bacteria, it goes dormant when it freezes." "So you froze the ground?" "We tapped the main line from the liquid nitrogen storage at the particle physics lab downtown, ran a pipeline through the old tunnel system. We are pumping liquid N2 into the foundation 24/7. It creates a permafrost barrier. Nothing gets in. Not the mud, not the dry ones." "And the power?" I pointed to the lights. Davies didn't answer immediately. He looked at the empty frames. "We have a coal furnace in the basement," he said, "but we ran out of coal 3 days ago." I looked at a pile of wood in the corner. It wasn't firewood. It was carved mahogany, gilded frames, antique chairs. "You're burning the exhibits," Sarah whispered. "We burn the furniture first," Davies said, his face hard. "Then the frames. We save the canvas. The canvas is the soul. The wood is just fuel." We were led to the triage wing, formerly the Impressionist gallery. Cots were set up. People were huddled in blankets. A doctor, a young woman with tired eyes, checked Sarah's leg. "Clean break," she said. "I can set it, but I need antibiotics. We're out." "We have nothing," I admitted. "We'll manage," she said. I walked back to Davies. "You have a fortress," I said, "but you're running out of fuel, and you're running out of nitrogen." "The nitrogen line is losing pressure," Davies nodded. "A leak somewhere in the tunnel. If the pressure drops, the ground thaws. If the ground thaws, the museum sinks." "How long?" "Maybe 2 days. And then?" "Then we evacuate to the lake." "The lake is mud." "Not all of it," Davies said. "We have a radio signal from the Navy pier. There's a ship, a freighter. It's stuck in the mud, but it's nuclear. It has power, it has water filtration." "Navy pier is 2 miles east, across the worst of the deep mud." "Exactly. That's why we haven't gone. We can't walk on the soup." I looked at my crew. We were exhausted, broken, but we were skywalkers. "You can't walk," I said, "but you can slide." Davies looked at me. "You have the nitrogen," I said. "Can you make it portable? Can you make ice bridges?" Davies frowned. "We have sprayers, but the range is limited." "I have an idea, but I need to see your basement, and I need to see Kowalski." I went down to the loading dock. It was a walk-in freezer. Kowalski was strapped to a gurney. The room was minus 20 degrees. His skin had stopped glowing. The gray cracks were still there, but the blue light was dim, pulsing slowly. He was conscious. "Marcus," he chattered. "Cold, so cold." "It's keeping you human, buddy," I said. "I saw them," Kowalski whispered.
In the fever. I saw the hive. The dry ones? No. The mud. It has a heart. Under the lake. A pulse. The epicenter, I realized. The vibration we felt on the crane. It's waking up, Kowalski said. The cold, it hurts it, but it makes it angry. It's coming for this place, Marcus. The heat, the body heat of the people. It's a beacon. I put a hand on his shoulder. His skin felt like frozen stone. We're leaving, I said. We're going to the ship, I promise. I went back upstairs. Davies, I said, gather your welders, gather your mechanics. What's the plan? We're building sleds, I said. Sleds? We can't zip line to the Navy pier. No elevation. We can't walk, so we skate. I grabbed a piece of charcoal and drew on the wall. We take the nitrogen tanks. We rig them to the back of flat-bottomed skiffs, maybe display cases or metal shelving units. We plumb the nozzles downward. An airboat? Davies asked. No, an ice boat, I said. We spray the nitrogen directly in front of the runners. We freeze a path as we move. We make our own road. Davies stared at the drawing. That uses a lot of gas. You said the line is leaking anyway, I argued. Use it or lose it. We load the people, the art, the food. We convoy to the ship. It's crazy, Davies said. It's engineering, I corrected. And it's the only way out. Suddenly the floor shook. Boom. Dust fell from the ceiling. Quake? Miller asked. No. Davies looked at the floor. Impact. Boom. Something was hitting the foundation from underneath. Kowalski was right, I said. It knows we're here. It's trying to break the ice. We need to work fast, I yelled. Everyone, if you can hold a wrench, get to the garage. The next 6 hours were a montage of desperation. We tore down the metal shelving units from the archives. We welded them into rafts. We strapped the heavy liquid nitrogen tanks to the rear. We plumbed copper piping to the front, crimping the ends to create spray nozzles. The frost runners, T-Bone would have called them. I missed him. We built 4 rafts. Raft 1, the plow, armed with the biggest tanks and the flamethrowers. Raft 2, the ambulance, Sarah, Kowalski, in a portable ice bath, and the other wounded. Raft 3 and 4, civilians, and the canvas, the art. Marcus, Sanchez called me over to Raft 1. We have a problem with the steering. On ice, we'll spin. Rudders, I said. We need blades. I looked around the workshop. There, in a crate marked medieval armor, swords, broadswords, claymores. Weld them on, I said. Use the swords as keels. It was insane. It was perfect. By dawn, the thumping from below was constant. The floor of the great hall was cracking. The ice barrier outside was fracturing. They're breaching, a guard yelled from the front entrance. I ran to the doors. The frozen mud ocean was cracking open, and rising out of the fissures were the dry ones, hundreds of them. But they weren't just the gray, human-sized ones anymore. There were giants, fused together. 3 or 4 bodies melted into one massive, multi-limbed abomination, a king dry one. It smashed a frozen car aside like a toy. It roared, a sound like tectonic plates grinding. "Start the engines!" I screamed, running back to the rafts. "We don't have engines," Miller yelled. "Open the valves!" We pushed the rafts out the loading dock doors, onto the frozen ramp leading down to the mud. "Board! Board!" Davies was directing the civilians. "Leave the bags, just the people." I jumped onto Raft 1. Sanchez was on the valve controls. Big Red was manning the flamethrower turret we'd rigged on the front. "Hit it!" Sanchez cranked the valve. Hiss! Liquid nitrogen spewed out the front nozzles. It hit the semi-liquid mud instantly. Crack, snap. A path of white ice formed in front of us. "Push!" We shoved off. The raft slid on the fresh ice. It picked up speed. We were skating on the surface of the apocalypse. We were surfing a chemical reaction. Raft 1, the plow, was leading the V formation. I was at the front, gripping the safety rail. Sanchez was manning the valves. Hiss! The liquid nitrogen blasted out of the coppered nozzles 3 feet in front of us. It hit the bubbling brown sludge and transformed it instantly. Flash freeze. The mud didn't just harden, it snapped into a crystalline white road. The sword blade runners of our raft hit the fresh ice a split second later. Scree-unch!
We drifted sideways. "Steer into it," I yelled at Miller, who was manning the rudder, a massive steel shelf bolted to a pivot. He hauled on the lever. The raft straightened out, sending a spray of frozen mud shavings into the air. I looked back. The convoy was holding. Raft 2 with Sarah and the freezer box, rafts 3 and 4 with the civilians and the rolled-up canvases of masterpieces. But behind them, the museum was dying. The giant, that mountain of fused limbs, had smashed through the front doors. It was wading into the mud, ignoring the cold. Its legs were freezing, cracking, but it kept coming, breaking the ice we left behind like a boat breaking through thin glass. "It's faster than us," Big Red yelled from the turret. "Range is closing, 200 yards. "More pressure," I ordered Sanchez. "Open the main valve to 80%. "If I do that, we run out of gas in a mile," Sanchez shouted back. "If you don't, we die in a minute. Do it!" We surged forward. The nitrogen cloud thickened, wrapping us in white fog. We were doing maybe 30 miles an hour now. We passed the wreckage of Millennium Park. The silver gate sculpture flashed by, a silver ball half submerged in the frozen muck. "Incoming, left flank!" I looked left. The mud surface was bulging, a mud whale. It breached. It exploded out of the slush 50 feet to our left. It was colossal, a worm of soil and rock the size of a subway train. It didn't have eyes, but it sensed the vibration of our runners. It crashed down onto the ice path, right between Raft 2 and Raft 3. Boom! The ice shattered. Raft 3, the civilian raft, swerved wildly to avoid the hole. "They're sliding off," Miller screamed. Raft 3's rear runner caught the edge of the slush. The raft spun. It dipped into the liquid mud. Screams. "Don't stop," I yelled, though it tore my heart out. "If we stop, we sink." I watched Raft 3 struggle. The men on board grabbed oars, shovels, and frantically paddled against the sludge. They managed to push back onto the ice track Raft 2 had left behind. "They're clear," Miller reported, "but they lost speed." "Keep the formation tight." I grabbed the radio. "Davies, keep your raft close to our wake. Use our ice." We hit the open stretch of the park, heading toward the lakefront. The Navy Pier Ferris wheel loomed in the distance, a skeletal circle against the smoky sky. And behind it, the ship, the SS Alpina, an old bulk freighter. It was massive, rusty red hull. It sat high in the mud, surrounded by a ring of black, oily water where its reactor heat kept the sludge liquid. "Bridge to the ship!" Davies was screaming into his radio on Raft 2. "This is the Art Institute convoy. We are coming in hot. Prepare the ramp." Static. Then a voice, crisp, military. "Convoy, this is Alpina. We see you. You have a massive heat signature pursuing you. What is that?" "It's a monster," Davies yelled. "Open the cargo doors." "Negative," the voice said. "We cannot lower the ramp into the liquid mud. You have to bridge the gap. We will lower the nets. You have to climb." "Climb?" I looked at the ship. The deck was 40 feet above the mud line. "We have wounded. We have a freezer box." "Then you better get creative," the ship replied. "We are charging the railguns. Keep your heads down." Railguns? Since when did a freighter have railguns? Then I saw the deck. It wasn't just a freighter. It had been retrofitted. Turrets, armor. This was a military extraction point that never left port. "Tank pressure dropping," Sanchez warned. "We have 10%. We were a quarter mile out. The giant behind us roared. It picked up a frozen car and hurled it. The car tumbled through the air, smashing into the ice 10 feet in front of our raft. We hit the debris. Bang! Our raft went airborne. For a second, we were flying in a cloud of nitrogen. We landed hard. The impact snapped the front left runner. The raft slewed violently to the left. "Correct! Correct!" Miller fought the rudder. We skidded sideways, plowing a wide fan of snow. We lost momentum. The giant was on us. I could smell it now. Dry earth and rotting meat. It loomed over the rear rafts. Boom, boom. 2 thunderclaps from the ship. Projectiles streaked over our heads at Mach 7. The railgun rounds hit the giant. They didn't just make a hole, they vaporized its upper torso. Kinetic energy turned the monster into a cloud of dirt. The lower half of the creature took 2 more steps, then crumbled into a pile of dirt. "Target destroyed," the ship radioed. "Welcome to the perimeter. You have 200 yards. Don't stop." "We're out of gas," Sanchez yelled. The hiss stopped. The white cloud vanished. We were coasting on momentum. The ice beneath us was thinning. I could hear the crack, crack, crack of the crust breaking under our weight. "We won't make the hull," I realized.
We were going to stop 50 yards short, in the liquid zone. "Raft 2!" I grabbed the radio. "Kowalski, the freezer!" "What?" Sarah's voice came back. "Open the freezer door. Dump the ice bath. We need a final burst of cold." "Marcus, that will kill him." "Do it, Sarah, or we all sink." I watched Raft 2. The door of the freezer box flew open. Water and ice cubes spilled out onto the mud. But then Kowalski stepped out. He wasn't human anymore. He was glowing bright sapphire blue. His skin was fully encrusted in the crystalline growth. He didn't look like a victim. He looked like a generator. He walked to the front of Raft 2. He raised his hands. The blue light intensified. It pulsed from his chest, down his arms. He screamed, a sound that wasn't a voice, but a frequency. Hum. The mud in front of the rafts didn't freeze white. It turned blue. It crystallized instantly, reacting to the spores in his body. He was catalyzing the reaction. "He's bridging it!" I yelled. "Go! Go!" The rafts slid over the blue path. We hit the side of the ship. Clang! "Nets down!" Cargo nets rolled down the rusty side of the hull. "Climb! Civilians first!" I grabbed the net. I hauled myself up, then reached down to grab Miller. We pulled the people up, hand over hand. The mud below was bubbling, furious at losing its meal. I looked down at Raft 2. Sarah was climbing the net, but Kowalski was still standing on the raft. He was glowing so bright it hurt to look at him. The heat from his mutation was melting the raft's metal floor. "Kowalski!" I screamed. "Grab the line!" He looked up. His eyes were gone, replaced by blue stars. He smiled. "It's warm here, Marcus," he said. His voice echoed in my head, not my ears. "The ship, the reactor. It's too hot. I can't go." "No, we can cool you down." "The hive is here." Kowalski looked at the mud. The mud whales were circling the raft. "I have to keep them back." He knelt down and touched the liquid mud. Flash! A shockwave of blue ice exploded outward from him. It froze the mud for 100 yards in every direction, trapping the whales, sealing the hull of the ship. He became a statue, an anchor of blue crystal in the sea of brown. "Goodbye, Skywalker," he whispered. I hung on the net, tears freezing on my cheeks. "Goodbye, brother." I climbed over the railing onto the deck. Soldiers in hazmat suits grabbed me. They sprayed me with decontamination foam. "Clear! Move him to Intech!" I was dragged through an airlock. The hiss of pressurization, the smell of clean, recycled air. I collapsed on the steel floor of the decontamination chamber. I looked around. My crew was there. Miller, Sanchez, Big Red, Sarah. T-Bone was gone. Kowalski was gone. But we were here. We were alive. 6 months later. The world didn't end. It just changed state. I stood on the bridge of the SS Alpina. We were anchored 5 miles offshore in the middle of Lake Michigan, or the Great Mud Flats of Michigan. The lake was gone. The liquefaction had drained the water table, or mixed it into a slurry so thick you could walk on it if you were fast. But the ship was a city. We weren't alone. Other ships had gathered. Barges, tankers, pleasure craft welded together into a floating shantytown. We call it the flotilla. We survive on the reactor power. We grow algae in the tanks. We harvest water from the humidity collectors. And we scavenge. I looked through the telescope mounted on the railing. The Chicago skyline was still there. The skyscrapers were tilted, sinking, looking like jagged teeth in a rotting mouth. The Willis Tower was gone, toppled last month in a storm. But the Prudential was still standing, and the Blue Cross. And on the roofs, I saw the lights. Blue lights. The vegetation, and shadows moving. The dry ones. They own the city now. "Captain Marcus!" I turned. Miller was there. He looked older. He had a scar on his cheek from the frost. "The Wind Riders are ready." "Okay," I said. "Let's go fishing." We walked to the flight deck. We didn't use cranes anymore. We used gliders, ultralights launched from the deck to skim over the mud, raiding the high-rises for supplies. I strapped into my glider. I checked the hook. I looked at the horizon. The ground betrayed us. It turned into a trap. So we stopped trusting the ground. We live on the steel. We live in the water. We live in the air.
I am Marcus. I am a skywalker, and we are still building bridges.